This deep dive is part of The Street Has Its Own Story, or in Greek, o dromos echi diki historia, provided by the podcaster Giannis Stefanidis. If you walk down the Ladadika district in modern Thessaloniki today, you are just instantly hit with this massive wave of sensory experiences.
Oh, yeah, completely. It's overwhelming in the best way.
Right. I mean, you're stepping over these old cobblestones, you're smelling roasted meats sizzling on open grills all around you.
And the music?
Yeah, you've got live music just spilling out of these taverna doors everywhere. It feels, I don't know, incredibly alive and incredibly permanent, right?
It does feel permanent. But what you don't realize as you're eating dinner inside these beautiful century-old brick walls is that you're essentially sitting inside an architectural phantom limb.
A phantom limb, that's an intense way to put it.
Well, it's a profound illusion, really. I mean, you are looking at a space that feels unified, but you are actually standing on a scar. Yeah, it's a street that survived an apocalyptic fire, sheltered World War I spies, and was quite literally sliced in half by city bureaucrats.
Which brings us to the actual ground we are covering today. We are dedicating this deep dive to uncovering the hidden mechanics of one specific, chaotic, and visually stunning street in that district, which is Demetrios Katouni Street.
A fascinating place to dig into.
It really is. So we're going to figure out who Katounis actually was, how a neighborhood of wholesale oil merchants accidentally became a fortress against disaster.
And how you physically slice a 1920s building in half without the whole thing just crumbling to the ground.
Exactly. Because when you look closely at Katouni Street, it stops being just a place to grab a drink.
Right. It becomes a physical record of the city's traumas and triumphs. The Ottoman commercial empire, European modernist ambitions, devastating earthquakes, and modern tourism. And it's all baked into the very same red bricks.
So if we are walking down Demetrios Katouni Street today, I guess the obvious first question is, who is Demetrios Katounis?
Well, the sources trace him back to 1794. He was born in the village of Galatista in Chalkidiki.
Okay, and his early life looking at the material is aggressively unremarkable. I mean, he moves to Thessaloniki as a young man simply to learn the tailoring trade.
Yeah, it's a completely working class, manual labor beginning, nothing glamorous about it at all.
Right, but then the sources show that as soon as he comes of age, he moves to the island of Saros.
Specifically Hermopolis.
Hermopolis, right.
Oh.
And somehow he transitions from a guy with a needle and thread into this massive shipping magnate with his own fleet. So you have to explain the mechanics here to me. How does a humble tailor afford ships?
I know, it sounds like a movie plot, but you really have to look at the socioeconomic reality of Hermopolis in the 1820s and 30s.
Okay.
It wasn't just, a random island port. Following the Greek War of Independence, Hermopolis became the absolute epicenter of Greek maritime trade.
Like a boomtown.
Exactly, a massive economic boomtown. So if you are a tailor in a port city that is rapidly expanding its commercial fleet, you aren't just hemming trousers. You're likely making and repairing sails.
Oh, right, because they need sails for all those new ships.
Precisely. And in the maritime economy of that era, cash was often pretty scarce. So tradesmen and suppliers frequently took fractional ownership in a ship's cargo as payment for their services.
Oh, wow. So it's an early form of equity. He's basically taking stock options instead of a salary.
That is exactly what he's doing. You get a tiny percentage of the profit from a massive cargo run to Odessa or Alexandria. And if the ship comes back, your small labor investment multiplies exponentially.
That is brilliant.
Yeah, you compound that over a decade, and suddenly you aren't fixing sails anymore. You're buying the hull. Then you're buying the whole ship. By the time he is 50 years old, in 1844, he has amassed this immense wealth and decides to return to Thessaloniki.
And he returns as a very different man. He never marries. He has no children. But he essentially takes this massive self-made shipping fortune and starts buying up real estate in the city.
Yep. And then he starts aggressively funding the Greek Orthodox community.
It was a massive influx of capital into the city's foundational structures, right?
Huge. I mean, he funds Greek schools, he builds churches, and crucially, he provides the financial backbone for the Theagio Hospital.
Which offered free health care, right?
Yes, exactly. Free health care. He was also a founding member of the FA8, which is the Brotherhood of Men of Thessaloniki. He even arranged for people from his hometown of Galatista to get employment and, free medical care in the city.
Wait, I have to challenge this a bit. Just looking at the history of the 19th century, was this purely altruistic?
Wow.
Or, was funding hospitals and brotherhoods a way for a self-made working class guy to
Yeah.
essentially buy the aristocratic social status he lacked
Yeah.
because he didn't have noble blood?
That's a very fair question, and historically it is almost always a mix of both. You see, in the Ottoman Empire, the state didn't provide a robust social safety net for the Greek Orthodox minority.
Yeah.
The community relied entirely on the millet system.
Meaning they had to self-govern.
Self-govern and self-fund their own schools and hospitals, yes. So stepping in to fund those institutions made Katounis a savior to the poor, absolutely. But it also instantly elevated him to the absolute highest tier of social and political influence among the city's elite.
I see. So you couldn't buy a noble title, but you could buy the eternal gratitude of the church and the populace.
Exactly. You buy the legacy.
Which perfectly explains the bizarre sequence of events surrounding his death. Because the sources show he dies on January 28th, 1884, and he gets this rushed, somewhat quiet burial.
Right.
But then, almost a month later, on February 22nd, they hold a massive second public funeral. I mean, you don't just get a do-over for a burial. What went wrong the first time?
Well, what went wrong was that the elite fundamentally underestimated the working class.
Really?
Yeah. When Katounis was buried hastily, the local guilds, they call them the esnafia, were absolutely outraged.
And these guilds aren't just like casual social clubs.
Right. Not at all. The guilds were the economic engine of the city. We're talking the tanners, the metal workers, the bakers, the dock workers. They held massive political leverage.
Because if the guilds stop working, the city starves.
Exactly. Commerce halts. And Katounis was their great benefactor. He funded the hospitals their families relied on.
Yeah.
So a quiet, rushed funeral by the city's upper crust was seen as an insulting dismissal of a man who belonged to the people.
Oh, wow. So the guilds essentially forced the issue.
They mobilized. They demanded a massive, formal public funeral weeks later.
So it was a flex of working class muscle. They were proving they had the power to dictate the city's public mourning.
Precisely. They forced the city's elite and high-ranking bishops to preside over this massive public spectacle attended by thousands of regular citizens.
That's incredible.
It is. And the sheer force of that public reverence is why, in 1888, a monumental sarcophagus was built for him in the Evangelistria Cemetery. And it's why, in 1951, both his hometown of Galatista and the municipality of Thessaloniki officially named streets after him.
So he buys his legacy, and the working class enforces it. But there is a massive irony here, I think.
Well-
Yeah, a man famous for funding pious churches and hospitals gets his name slapped onto a street that, historically, was the epicenter of cutthroat, chaotic, wholesale trading.
Ah, yes. The contrast is sharp.
Let's look at the physical roots of Katouni Street. It runs right through the Ladadika district.
Right, and to understand the geography there, you have to go all the way back to the 16th century. This area was known as the Egyptian market.
The Egyptian market.
Yeah, it sat directly on the site of the old filled-in Byzantine port. And by 1668, historical records logged 500 shops operating in this specific zone.
500 shops just trading wholesale commodities. The sources mention linen, henna, sugar, rice, coffee, and oil, all flowing in from Egypt and the Mediterranean.
It was a massive hub.
If you map out the logistics of this, 17th century Ladadika is operating exactly like a modern-day Amazon fulfillment center.
Huh. That's a great way to put it. The logistics of it are staggering when you consider the technology of the time.
Right, no forklifts, no trucks.
Exactly. You have a constant stream of kayaks, those traditional wooden transport boats, pulling right up to the waterfront edge. The area was designed for sheer throughput.
Just moving boxes and barrels constantly.
Heavy, unrefined goods being unloaded by hand. They drag them into these dense two-story brick warehouses, break them down into smaller units, and then redistribute them across the entire Balkan Peninsula.
And the oil is the anchor of the whole operation. I mean, the name Ladadika literally translates to the oil merchant district from the Greek word lady for oil.
Yep, lady.
You can just imagine the heavy, fire-prone nature of storing massive vats of raw oil in tightly packed brick buildings, which makes what happens next almost impossible to believe.
The fire.
Yeah, in 1917, the defining catastrophe of modern Thessaloniki hits. The Great Fire.
The fire leveled 70% of the city. It was an apocalyptic wall of flame that wiped out the historic center and left tens of thousands of people homeless.
But if you look at the historical fire maps, the destruction halts miraculously at the very edge of the Ladadika neighborhood. It stopped exactly where the massive Bank of Greece building stands today. You would think an entire neighborhood packed with wholesale oil would just go up like a Roman candle. How does it even survive?
It comes down to a combination of shifting wind patterns and, ironically, the sheer density of the Ottoman-era masonry.
The bricks saved them.
Yeah, the heavy brick and the lack of widespread timber structures in those specific warehouses acted as a blunt physical buffer. Ladadika emerged from the ashes largely intact.
But the survival is short-lived, unfortunately. Because what the flames couldn't destroy, the city planners went after with a vengeance.
This is the great tragedy of the street. After the fire, the city commissioned the French architect Ernest Hébrard to completely redesign Thessaloniki.
They wanted a total overhaul.
Exactly. The goal was to erase the chaotic, winding Ottoman layout and impose a modern, rational European grid system.
They wanted grand boulevards.
And to get those grand boulevards, they had to extend Simiski Street and open up Salamino Street. And they didn't just route these new roads around the surviving historical market.
No, they didn't.
They drove the roads directly through it.
They literally sliced the neighborhood in half. And if you walk the street today, the geography is totally bizarre because of it.
It really is.
Katouni Street technically stretches from Vasileios Iraklios down to Konterioti by the port, but it is violently bisected by the heavy traffic of Simiski Street.
Yeah, the flow is just broken.
Right. The upper part allows cars, but the lower part is this beautiful cobblestone pedestrian zone, and the visual evidence of this urban violence is still sitting there at the corner of Katouni 20 and Simiski 30.
Oh, the sliced building?
Yes. The sources highlight this stunning four-story neoclassical building from the 1920s. It recently went to auction for 4 million euros. But if you look at the side of the building that faces the busy street, it doesn't have a finished facade. It is just a raw, protruding wall.
It's wild to see. You have to think about the physical mechanics of doing that to a building in the early 1960s.
How do you even do that without it falling over?
Well, when the city finally executed the road expansion, they had to demolish the adjacent structures. But these buildings shared load-bearing party wall.
Oh, they were physically connected.
Exactly. So workers had to literally shear off the neighboring building, carefully shore up the foundation and internal masonry of the surviving 1920s structure, and just leave it standing exposed. It is an architectural amputation.
It is exactly like a phantom limb. The building is standing there, structurally sound, but wearing the scar of the building it used to be attached to.
Perfectly said.
And this visual clash is everywhere on Katouni Street. You aren't just walking past old buildings, you are walking through different eras of ambition. Let's look at the pedestrian end. Katouni 6.
The Capsis Bristol Hotel, built in 1860.
And during World War I, this is where the history gets deeply cinematic. The sources confirm this specific hotel was the hideout for a notorious spy known as Fraulein Doctor.
Which makes perfect geographical sense, actually.
Why is that?
Well, during World War I, Thessaloniki was the base for the Ladadika front. The port was flooded with French, British, Serbian, and Russian troops. It was a hotbed of competing intelligence networks.
Spies everywhere.
Everywhere. So if you are a spy, a grand hotel sitting right on the edge of the wholesale commercial district and the waterfront, that is the ultimate vantage point.
Oh, I see.
You have the cover of international merchants mixed with direct sight lines to military logistics.
Brilliant. And then right up the street from the spy hideout, you hit the interwar period. Katouni 14 and 16, built in 1925. Number 14 was designed by the architect Rubens, and number 16 is the Isaac Herrera & Co. building.
Beautiful buildings.
Yeah, you can really see the shift from heavy Ottoman utility to European elegance. The sources detail these arched mezzanines, half pillars, and these long, sweeping wrought iron balconies resting on sculpted stone corbels.
It's a totally different vibe. And then looming over all of it, you have the Bank of Greece, designed by Aristomenes Valvis between 1928 and 1933. This represents another massive mechanical leap for the street.
How so?
Valvis used reinforced concrete and foundational techniques that were groundbreaking for Greece at the time. It allowed for a scale and imposing security that the 19th century bricklayers could never have achieved.
So you have this incredible architectural resume all in one street. Ottoman brick, neoclassical elegance, interwar art deco, and heavy 1930s concrete. But you might be thinking, with all this historical weight, the street must have been revered.
Unfortunately, no.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The sources show Katouni went through a devastating dark age.
The decline was very systemic. It actually started during that same World War I era.
When all the troops were there.
Yeah, the proximity to the port, which was just flooded with transient soldiers and sailors, shifted the economy. The grand commercial trade began moving elsewhere, and the lower end of the street devolved into a notorious red light district.
Just totally changed the character of the place.
Completely. It filled up with brothels, cheap taverns, and illicit trade.
And then you add in the urban slicing we talked about that cut off its natural connection to the city center, and the ultimate physical blow, which was the massive earthquake of 1978.
Oh, the earthquake was brutal. The mechanics of that earthquake on unreinforced century-old masonry, it was devastating. Buildings that had already been neglected for decades suffered severe structural fatigue.
Just crumbling.
Cornices collapsed, roofs caved in.
Yeah.
By the early 1980s, the entire Ladadika area was effectively an abandoned, dangerous ruin.
Developers were probably just drooling at the prospect of bulldozing the whole thing and throwing up cheap concrete apartment blocks.
Oh, absolutely. That was the standard operating procedure for much of the 20th century. But in 1985, a massive bureaucratic intervention changed everything.
Thank goodness.
The Greek Ministry of Culture, led by Melina Mercouri, officially declared Ladadika a protected historical site.
It's hard to overstate how critical that was. It legally froze the bulldozer economy.
Exactly. It strictly prohibited further demolition. If you owned a ruined brick warehouse, you couldn't tear it down. You were legally forced to restore it.
Wow.
This single act saved roughly 70 historic buildings. They repaved the streets with cobblestones, buried the modern utility lines, and forced the city to actually engage with its past rather than just pave over it.
And the emotional and cultural impact of that preservation was massive. It wasn't just about saving old bricks, right? It was about reclaiming the city's gritty soul.
It really was.
It resonated so deeply that in 1994, the legendary Greek singer Demetrios Katounis released a massive hit song simply titled Ladadika.
Ah, yes, an iconic song.
Right. The lyrics were written by Thessaloniki native Philippos Grapsis, and they didn't try to sanitize the area. The song mythologized the brothels, the sailors, the mud, and the sheer survival of the district. It embedded the neighborhood permanently into the national consciousness.
It's amazing. It took a forgotten, earthquake-damaged ruin and elevated it into a symbol of endurance.
Which perfectly explains why if you go to Katouni Street today, it is absolutely packed day and night.
Always busy.
The heavy wholesale commodities are gone, replaced by modern coffee shops, boutique hotels, and nightlife. But the core function of the street hasn't really changed.
Not at its heart, no.
The sources specifically point to the traditional Taverna Katouni sitting right there at Katouni 6, which is the old hotel building.
Right in the historical anchor of the street.
Exactly. They serve traditional Greek meze. They have live music every weekend. It proves that despite the fires, the spies, the earthquakes, and the urban slicing, Katouni Street's fundamental DNA is intact.
It's a survivor.
It has always been a place of heavy traffic, feeding people, entertaining people, and acting as a dense gathering place. The cargo shifted from barrels of oil to wine and meze, but the spirit of the space is identical.
It is a brilliant example of urban continuity. You know, the architecture really dictates the behavior. Those narrow, heavy brick spaces force people closely together today, just as they forced the merchants together 300 years ago.
So, stepping back, we have traced an incredible timeline here. We started with a tailor from Chalkidiki who used the maritime boom of Cyrus to compound his wealth and buy his way into Thessaloniki's eternal memory, backed by the political muscle of the local guilds.
Quite a journey.
And his name gets attached to an Ottoman-era Egyptian oil market. That market survives a wall of fire, shelters international espionage, gets violently sliced in half by city planners, crumbles in an earthquake, and is finally rescued by a cultural mandate and a pop song.
It's almost too much history for one street, but it highlights something we rarely consider when moving through our daily routines.
What's that?
Well, when you walk down a street, you are interacting with the extreme tip of an iceberg. You see the restored facades and the modern menus, but beneath the cobblestones, there are overlapping layers of sheer survival.
It's so true.
It makes you realize that every city is filled with invisible phantom streets. How many buildings around us are holding the physical scars of urban redesign? And how many forgotten benefactors, how many political battles fought by local guilds are quietly holding up the foundational infrastructure of the cities we live in?
It changes the way you look at a brick wall. It really makes you wonder what your own street has survived, what invisible lines of history you are crossing every time you step out your front door, and what secrets are still hiding in plain sight.
Absolutely.
Remember, this deep dive is part of The Street Has Its Own Story, or in Greek, dromos echi, diki historia, provided by the podcaster Giannis Stefanidis.